जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजना यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजना यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजना यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजना यमुनातीरवनचारी यमुनातीरवनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजना यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजना यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजना यमुनातीरवनचारी Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupada Pramansa Parivrajakacharya Stodrishada Shishmad Vai Charanarvindam Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Pramansa Parivrajakacharya Stodrishada Shishmad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Das Raghunath Shad Goswami Prabhu Gana Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से गौ श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय. श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय. श्री नवदीप मायापुर धाम की जय. पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय. गंगा मैया की जय. यमुना मैया की जय. भक्ति देवी की जय. तुलसी महारानी की जय. श्री भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर आविर्भाव दिवस की जय. गौर प्रेमानंदी. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. From Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, entitled The Drashtak with Horn, Text 22. Andapureva vadiro mandapragyascha sampratam. Vishirnadanto mad agni saragah kafam udvahan andapuraiva vadiro mandapragyascha sampratam. Vishirnadanto mandagne saragah kafam udvahan andapuraiva vadiro mandapragyascha sampratam. Vishirnadanto mandagni saragah kafam udvahan andapuraiva vadiro mandapragyascha sampratam. Vishirnadanto mandagni saragah kafam udvahan andapuraiva vadiro mandapragyascha sampratam. Vishirnadanto mandagni saragah kafam udvahan andapuraiva vadiro mandapragyascha sampratam. Vishirnadanto madagni saragah kafam udvahan. Matajis? Word to word translation. Andaha, blind, pura, from the beginning, eva, certainly, vadiraha, hard of hearing, manda pragyaha, memory shortened, cha, and sampratam, recently, vishirna, loosened, dantaha, teeth, mand agnihi, liver action decreased, saragaha, with sound, kafam, coughing much mucus, udvahan, coming out. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. You have been blind from your very birth. And recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. Purport. The symptoms of old age, which had already developed in the Dhritarashtra, were all one after another pointed out to him as warning that death was nearing very quickly. And still he was foolishly carefree about his future. The signs pointed out by Vidur in the body of the Dhritarashtra were signs of apakshaya, or dwindling of the material body before the last stroke of death. The body is born, it develops, stays, creates other bodies, dwindles, and then vanishes. But foolish men want to make a permanent settlement of the perishable body and think that their caste, children, society, country, etc. will give them protection. With such foolish ideas, they become overtaken by such temporary engagements and forget altogether that they must give up this temporary body and take a new one, again to arrange for another term of society, friendship and love, again to perish ultimately. They forget their permanent identity and become foolishly active for impermanent occupations, forgetting altogether their prime duty. Saints and sages like Vidur approach such foolish men to awaken them to the real situation. But they take such sadhus and saints as parasites of society, and almost all of them refuse to hear the words of such sadhus and saints. although they welcome show bottle sadhus and so-called saints who can satisfy their senses. Vidur was not a sadhu to satisfy the ill-gotten sentiment of the Dhrashtra. He was correctly pointing out the real situation of life and how one can save oneself from such catastrophes. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamarupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamblam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamascha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamascha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratushe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patita Nama Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhayeva patita nama pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You have been blind from your very birth, and recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you're coughing up mucus. Hare Krishna. So, in the 12th canto, 3rd chapter of the Bhumi Geet, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in the commentary of Yastu Uttama Shloka Guna Anuvada, where he explains what it means to glorify Krishna. And there he writes that basically glorifying Uttama Shloka or Krishna means to glorify his great devotees. But better than that is to glorify the eternal associates of Sri Krishna. To hear the qualities of Sri Krishna from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and specifically to discuss the pastimes of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, taking the advice of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I'll try to intersperse the glories of Vidur with the glories of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and if possible also of Srila Jiva Goswami, as they're the eternal associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I just saw Sarup Damodar Goswami Prabhu here. I think he's just left. But I would just like to thank him because he was the first devotee I met. He's there? Haribol Prabhu. He's the first devotee I met when I made my first attempt to go to Vrindavan. I think it was 96 or something. And he was the first devotee I met in the train. And I was a bit surprised because there were not so many devotees that time. So I was pleasantly surprised that I was going to Vrindavan. I didn't inform many devotees. There were very few devotees. I just made an attempt on my own, reading Prabhupada's Krishna book. I was inspired. So when I met Prabhuji there, I took it as a real positive sign. It's auspicious. Krishna is blessing. And he was very encouraging, actually. He guided me where I should go, where I should stay. Though I messed it up on reaching there, but still I remembered what he said. So thank you very much, Prabhu. And I take it an auspicious sign that he's there today also. So, actually, probably I'll start with Bhakti Vinod Thakur first, and then go to the character of Vidur also, or however Krishna inspires. So the Pranati mantra is Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchita Anandanamine Gauri Shakti Sarupaya Rupanuga Varayate. So we'll just break this Pranati mantra to understand the position of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. So Bhakti Vinod was the title that was given to Srila Kedarnath Dutt. That was his civil name. That was his name when he was born, given to him by his father. But in the year of 86-87, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he was still the magistrate then, removed, or wrote profusely and moved nearly about 10 books in a span of 1 year. And seeing this, all the Brahmana and the Vaishnavas, headed by Vipin Bihari Goswami, who was a spiritual master, his school guru in one sense, awarded him this title of Bhakti Vinod. Bhakti Vinod literally means one who takes pleasure in the pastimes of devotional service. And Kedarnath Dutt at that time was hesitant to accept this title. But then he writes very candidly and very honestly that I was inspired in a dream by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to accept the title. And therefore, I accepted the title awarded by the Vaishnavas. Satchid Ananda Namine. So Satchid Anand was actually a title previously given to Kedarnath Dutt. This was, Bhakti Vinod was the title that he received in about 86-87. And Satchidanand was a title that he was awarded in, I think, 68-69, when he wrote essay, Satchidananda Prem Alankar, which was inspired by the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, when he came in touch with the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, specifically with the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he said, I read it once, and I got a bit of idea. But then I read the second time, and that is when I was really inspired by the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then he composes this essay, Satchidananda Prem Alankar. It is because of this essay, the title is awarded to Kedarnath Dutt at that time as Satchidanand. So, Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya. So Bhakti Siddhanta Sri Thakur in one of his essays clarifies this point of why Bhakti Vinod Thakur is known as Gauri Shakti Swarupaya. So if you go to his house in Godrum Dweep, you will see that the worshipable deities there of Bhakti Vinod Thakur are Gaur Gadadhar. So Gaur Shakti is nothing but, as you know, the Panchtatvatmakam Krishnam, Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam, Bhakta Avtaram, Bhakta Akyam, Namami Bhakti Shaktikam. So this Bhakti Shakti or Gauri Shakti is not different from Gadadhar Pandit. So Gauri Shakti Sarupaya. So he's actually the Sarup or the Avesh of Gadadhar Pandit. So that is what it means, Gauri Shakti Sarupaya. Rupanuga Varayate. He is foremost in the lineage of the devotees of Rupa Goswami, or he is a strict follower of Rupa Goswami. That's how Srila Prabhupada translates. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself actually clarifies his position in Krishna Leela in one of his books. I think it's Navdeep Dham Tarang or something that he composes, where he clarifies that he is Kamal Manjari, assisting Anang Manjari in the Kunj of Lalita Devi. That's Swananda Sukhad Kunja. That's the Kunj of Lalita Devi. That's how his house is also named in Grodhumdeep. In fact, his house is also named the same way at the banks of Radha Kund. That's exactly where Lalita Devi's Kunj is also there. So he clarifies that how he's actually assisting Anang Manjari in her pastimes in assisting Lalita Sakhi. It's also interesting to note that actually if you see the Pranati mantra of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, that's right. So in that case also it said Gaur Kishoraya Sakshat Vairagya Murate. So here it is Sarupaya. That's Gaur Shakti Sarupaya in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's case. And in Gaur Kishore Das Babaji's case, it is Vairagya. Sakshat Vairagya Murate. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, though his spiritual master, his Siksha Guru was Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, but he takes his Babaji Vesh from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. So Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj was actually inspired by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he would every day come to hear his lectures. When he would lecture in Godrumdeep at Swananda Sukhad Kunj. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur then implores Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. In fact, even before he requests Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, Gaur Kishore Babaji Maharaj by his intuition realizes that this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going to ask of him. So when he comes to know this, he actually leaves one fine day from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house unannounced and hides himself in Navdweep. And he knows that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going to come to Navdweep searching for him. So what Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj does is actually, he hides himself in a veranda of a prostitute's house. Because he knows that Bhaktivinoda Thakur will come and search him all over in Navdweep. But this will be the most unlikely place that he'll ever come to search for him. And so realizing this, he hides himself in the veranda of a prostitute's house. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur in fact comes to Navdeep searching for Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. He searches him all around, but he's not able to find him. And being disappointed, he goes back. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, by dint of his vision, realizes that he's gone back and he becomes joyous. And he actually starts performing kirtan, in a loud manner. He says, yes, I have cheated him, And he's jubilant that, he's actually able to get away with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. That was his nature. But then Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj comes to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house, again to hear him speak. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur this time again requests him. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj says, yes, that's the desire of Mahaprabhu, I'll give you Babaji Vesh. So the point here is actually Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj is Sakshat Vairagya Murte. So who's the Vairagya Murte in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela? Who's the Vairagya Murte? Okay, who's the Acharya of Vairagya? Raghunath Das Goswami. And whom did Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu hand over Raghunath Das Goswami to? Sarup Damodar Goswami. So Sarup Damodar Goswami actually is the Vairagya Murte. And he is not different from Lalita Sakhi. So that actually explains the whole Siksha line also in terms of how they are placed in Krishna Leela. So Sarup Damodar Goswami is actually Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj is supposed to be the Avesh Shakti of Sarup Damodar Goswami. And in the line of Lalita Sakhi, because that's how Bhaktivinoda Thakur is placed, he accepts Babaji Vesh from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Of course, coming back to the chapter here, we have Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur again explain what is the sequence of the flow of these chapters. So the whole idea is that it was inquired that please, explain the birth of Parikshit Maharaj. And in explaining the birth of Parikshit Maharaj, the storyline of Ashwatthama is explained. And now it is proposed to explain the subduing of Kali, by Sud Goswami, the subduing of Kali by Parikshit Maharaj. But to come to that point, he actually endeavors to describe the coronation of Parikshit Maharaj. Because when he is the king, he is able to subdue Kali. Now, to explain the coronation of Parikshit Maharaj, these chapters are explained, where it is explained how Dhritarashtra actually, by the instructions, by the inspiration of Vidur, quits the kingdom. The kingdom is then taken over by the Pandavas, and then Arjun comes from Dwarka, and the Pandavas then retire timely. So that's how the flow is, and that's why this chapter comes in between. But then the chapter gives us an opportunity to actually appreciate Vidur and to glorify Vidur. One of the most amazing facts is, now for a person who's not apt in reading transcendental literature, who's absorbed in mundane rasa, for him this plot will be quite interesting. Because if you remember, Vidur actually leaves. Sorry, I have the cough and mucus describing those. Sign of old age. Any case, but Vidur is actually humiliated by Duryodhan and is asked to leave the assembly, the Kaurava assembly. And Vidur actually takes it as an opportunity, as an indication from Lord Krishna, because he's actually bewildered, he's in duality, because he does not want to fight for Duryodhan. At the same time, he knows that it will not be right for him to fight on the side of Pandavas. So he's not able to decide. So taking this as an opportunity, he leaves. And he's quite happy about it. So for a person, if he reads this plot, he'll be surprised, and he'll think, oh, so Vidur is probably taken an opportunity to get back at Dhritarashtra. He's taken an opportunity to square up with Dhritarashtra, because his son actually chucked him out of the kingdom. And this is a good opportunity to chuck out Dhritarashtra of his kingdom now. And probably that's why he's making all this, philosophical presentation in front of Dhritarashtra, so that he can sweetly, in a nice way, chuck Dhritarashtra out of the kingdom. But it's interesting to note that it also highlights the leadership qualities of Vidur. So Vidur is in disagreement with Dhritarashtra on so many terms and advises Dhritarashtra on number of occasions against his desires. Still, Dhritarashtra reposes his faith in Vidur. That's really interesting. Because Vidur is his minister, and on number of occasions he's very clear with his judgment, he's very clear with his opinions. His opinions do not tally with Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is not happy about it, but Dhritarashtra in his hearts of hearts is convinced that Vidur is still my well-wisher. And that is why when Vidur actually takes this opportunity to instruct Dhritarashtra, Dhritarashtra already knows, it's so obvious to him that old age is approaching. But Vidur is just taking this opportunity to remind him. So actually Jara, is usually loosely translated as old age, but Prabhupada is so specific. He says, actually Jara means infliction because of old age. It's just not old age. Yeah. So actually that's what is in the story of Puranjan also, where Jara is taken as Kalakanya, the daughter of Kal, right? And the soldiers accompanying Kalakanya are nothing but the diseases that accompany old age, the symptoms that accompany old age, the diseases that accompany old age. And Parajuar is taken as brother. So actually, Narad Muni is offering this Yavana king, Kalakanya, to be accepted as wife. And Prabhupada says, but because he's a Yavana, Malecha, He has no differentiation of what is a wife and what is a sister. So he accepts him as a sister because they do not know to differentiate. And just for their sense gratification, they can go to any extent. Making the point that how even when the person approaches old age, because he's so attached to his sense gratification, that's all that he knows, he loses his sense of discrimination. And thinking his body to be all in all, just wants to enjoy. And soon he's afflicted by parajwara, that is high fever. Any case. So Vidur takes this as an opportunity. And so very interesting that the Dhrashtra does not get back at Vidur and say, oh, please don't try to get back at me just because my son chucked you out of the kingdom. He knows that Vidur is his well-wishing friend and accepts his advice. That is what is leadership about, of actually caring for a person. So though he had so much different opinions, he had so much disagreements, both of them had so much disagreements, but Dhritarashtra never doubted the intention of Vidur. Because of his attachments, he was not able to accept the opinions of Vidur. He was not able to accept the advice of Vidur, but he never doubted the intent of Vidur. That was the character of Vidur. Yeah. That was the way he stuck to his opinions and passed his judgments and gave his advices. The same thing we see with Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life. Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself was a judge, that was his profession. And many times he had to give judgments which were not really pleasing to any of the parties. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur never stepped back from taking clear judgments and decisions. In fact, when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was staying in Puri, it so happened that he realized that the king of Puri, and the king of Puri at that time was a big position. Of course, I'll come to this point later. But the point is, he realizes the king of Puri actually is, swindling some money from the temple fund. At that time, it was to the tune of Rs 80,000. And when the Thakur comes to know this, he actually implicates the king for this forgery, for this theft, and makes the king to compensate for this theft by sponsoring all the offerings that are made to Lord Jagannath, all the 52 offerings that are made to Lord Jagannath. And the king actually gets furious, because it is not the first time that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, takes to such a position with the king. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he comes to Puri, it was at this time that he writes in his Swalikhit Jivani that he develops anurag to the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. And so when he sees the Pandits and the Brahmanas in Lord Jagannath in front of the Mukti Mandap, having their philosophical discussion based on the Mayavad philosophy, he's not very happy. And therefore, then he collects his own group of devotees and starts discussing about Sri Krishna and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exactly opposite to the Mukti Mandap. That is where you see are the footprints of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu today. That is from where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would have darshan of the chakra. So that is where actually Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur starts having his own sabha. So once when he's actually discussing Krishna Katha with his devotees, the king just barges in with his followers, and there are about 40-50 of them, in a very rude manner. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur minces no words, and on the spot actually chastises the king for having such a deplorable etiquette in front of all the Vaishnavas. The king is actually humbled and begs forgiveness from all the devotees assembled there. So it is not the first time that actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur takes a position contrary to the actions of the king. So the king is actually disturbed when he is implicated by Bhaktivinoda Thakur for this theft. And he secretly, because he knew that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is in a powerful position. Now it is interesting, how Bhaktivinoda Thakur takes his position vis-a-vis his engagement with the Britishers. So if you study the historical background of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and it's interesting, because even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami focuses on the internal aspect of devotional service and does not focus so much on the external aspects of the times of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But there are many scriptures which do. So you actually combine the narrative that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is giving with the narrative given in the other scriptures at the times, the historical times of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It makes a fascinating reading to actually understand that how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu engaged with the external world. Same in the case of Bhakti Vinod Thakur. So if you see, in the times of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, the nationalistic movement was not actually, in one sense, taken root so strongly. It was in the times of probably of 1857, when the uprising took place, and the nationalistic movement starts taking its ground. But it's still not gained enough momentum. So it's not that Bhakti Vinod Thakur didn't know about it. Bhakti Vinod Thakur very well knew about it. In fact, most of the nationalists were his friends right from childhood. It was just in the natural course of his social dealings. Now, since I talk about social dealings and we are talking about old age, I just remembered a point of Bhakti Vinod Thakur where he mentions, I do not know where exactly, maybe it's Chaitanya Shikshamrit, where he mentions how a devotee is supposed to behave and take and be sure that how he's able to perform his sadhana, especially for the sadhak. He says, since we are talking about old age and its affliction, he says, the first priority for a sadhaka is that he should take care of his health, because his body is the instrument of achieving his goal. Secondly, he says, he should be absorbed in reading the scriptures, analyze and assimilate them. Thirdly, he says, and very interesting, he says, a sadhaka should engage in such a service to Krishna and his devotees, which is pleasing to his mind. Very interesting aspect. He says he should engage himself in a service that is pleasing to his mind. He is not neglecting the aspect of the mind. Yeah, he's not neglecting to the aspect of the mind. Of course, but in any case. So, and then the fourth point he says is he should have healthy social intercourse. That is, he should have healthy social interactions. That is how he can actually progress in devotional service. And so Bhakti Vinod Thakur was very well aware of what was going around him. And he very well engaged with these aspects. Same is the case with the Goswamis. That was the title awarded to Bhakti Vinod Thakur by I think it was Shishir Kumar Ghosh, right? When he saw the activities of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, so Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he retired from his services to the British in 1894. And after that, he actually started collecting for building the temple at Yogapith. And he would go door to door in Calcutta, just asking for a donation of ₹1. That was his way of actually engaging as many as possible people in the devotional service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And seeing Bhakti Vinod Thakur do this, Shishir Kumar Ghosh actually wrote in an article in his Amrit Bazar Patrika, glorifying Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, saying that I have not seen the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, but I am seeing the activities of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and that actually reminds me of the 6 Goswamis. And that's why I say that Bhakti Vinod Thakur is the 7th Goswami. So Shishir Kumar Ghosh was actually a nationalist. But Bhakti Vinod Thakur had tied up with him to write some articles for a magazine which was actually linked to the Amrit Bazar Patrika. And Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Shishir Kumar Ghosh, who was actually influenced by Bhakti Vinod Thakur's teaching to take shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In fact, he was so influenced that he himself wrote some books glorifying Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But when this magazine was composed, and it went for quite a number of years, Bhakti Vinod Thakur was continuously contributing to this magazine. At one point, Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually stopped giving his articles to this magazine. When he realized that Shishir Kumar Ghosh is also pushing his nationalistic ideas through the magazine, he was not very comfortable with the idea. So he maintained his relationship with Shishir Kumar Ghosh, and they in fact had very good discussions. But then, at some point, he knew how he is supposed to engage with Shishir Kumar Ghosh. We see this also in the case of the 6 Goswamis. So Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis actually engaged with the Mughals. They actually took up the service of Nawab Hussain Shah. He was actually a Muslim. He was a Yavana. But still, they accepted his service because they knew that that is the most appropriate thing to do at this time. Otherwise, the Shah will actually become a nuisance to the practicing devotees. But as soon as they actually get an indication from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they immediately leave the service of Nawab Hussain Shah. Because Nawab Hussain Shah, if I remember correctly, was a Turkish. And it is during this time that the Mughals actually, headed by Humayun and then Babur, or other way around, I'm not very sure of the history, but they actually start, conquering the different parts of Bharatvarsh. And that is one reason actually that Bhaktivinoda, actually Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sends them to Vrindavan. It is both. It is the internal reason that they should excavate the lost places of Vrindavan, establish the temples there, excavating the lost deities of Vrindavan, preach the glories of Sri Krishna and devotional service unto him, write the Bhakti Shastras. For Sri Rupa Goswami, in fact, gives more to instructions that specifically find where Govind Dev is and serve the Akinchan Vaishnavas who are staying there. But the external reason for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also is he realizes the fact that the Delhi is going to be the seat of the Mughal Sultanate. And that is where the Goswamis should fruitfully engage with the powers that will be there. And in fact, Rupa Goswami does that. Rupa Goswami has such nice relationship that in fact with the Mughals that Humayun actually issues a decree to the fact that the cows of Rupa Goswami should be able to graze freely wherever they want. No taxes should be levied to the cows of Srila Rupa Goswami. So in fact, they very nicely engage. That's what even Jeev Goswami does with Akbar. Yeah. That is what even Man Singh does. In fact, Man Singh is the disciples of one of the Goswamis. I think it's Raghunath Bhatt Goswami that he takes Diksha from. But at the same time, though he takes Diksha from Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, he's engaged in the service of the Mughals. He's one of the jewels in the court of Akbar. The same is the case with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He apparently engages with the Britishers. Yeah. In fact, it's not only the Goswamis, it's even with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is how actually they engage with the social order. That is how the politics of the whole thing is. So yes, politics in a narrow sense may be, it comes from the Greek word polity, which means citizens or city. But in a larger sense, it also means policies. Policies that will actually influence how the citizens live. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he sees the Qazi actually causing nuisance or causing disturbance in practice of devotional service, he actually instigates the whole mass of public to revolt against the Qazi. But if you read the whole section carefully, his revolt is not only against the Qazi. That's the external reason. In one sense, he's opposing the Qazi for actually causing disturbance, but the point that he's actually trying to make, and this is the political point that he's trying to make, is he's opposing the Smarta Brahmanas. Because it was the Smarta Brahmanas who actually go and complain to the Qazi. That nowhere in our scriptures it has been said that one should actually chant the names of Lord Hari so loudly. And actually by doing so, they're causing disturbance in the Hindu society. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by opposing the Qazi, is not only opposing the Qazi, but actually opposing the Smarta Brahmanas at that time. So they very well know how to engage in the polity of the whole of the whole society. That's what Bhakti Vinod Thakur does exactly. Man Singh, Shivaji Maharaj at that time, in fact, Shivaji Maharaj takes a contrary, action. He actually opposes the Mughals openly, right? He fights them out. Man Singh make friends with them. But both have a clear objective to establish the Vedic, the Sanatana Dharma. But they take different approaches. It's how Krishna inspires anyone, right? So Vidur, interestingly, takes a neutral approach. Nor does he become part of the Pandava Sena, nor he becomes part of the Kaurava Sena. But he actually, in one sense, takes such a strategy, both spiritually and materially, to be effective in pleasing Krishna, in fulfilling his desire. Because Krishna explains when Sanjay is sent, I think, as a messenger on behalf of Dhritarashtra to the Virat kingdom, where actually Sanjay pleads on behalf of Dhritarashtra, it'll be better if the Pandavas still continue staying in the forest and don't come back to ask their kingdom. Because anyhow they have got used to stay in the forest. What's the point coming back? Duryodhana is doing good managing the kingdom. So externally there was nothing wrong in Duryodhana's managing the kingdom. He was actually doing it very well. So in one sense, Dhritarashtra actually hints to the Pandavas, it's better you just stay in the forest and don't come back. That's the time when Krishna makes the point. The Kauravas are actually like a tree, the root of which is Dhritarashtra, the trunk of which is Duryodhana, the branches are Karna and Shakuni, and the leaves are the sons of Duryodhana. So yes, Arjun, Bhim, as warriors, they were very successful in destroying the Kaurava army. They were able to destroy the trunk, they were able to destroy the branches, they were able to destroy the leaves, everything. But the root still remained. The root was the Dhritarashtra. And the streak could have still arisen to spoil the plans of Krishna. It is this root that Vidur is able to burn in a very nice way, in a very spiritual way, by inspiring the Dhritarashtra to quit his attachment to his body and take to the path of yoga. Of course, because of his offenses, he's not able to directly take the path of devotional service. But in this way, Vidur very strategically actually acts according to the plan of Krishna. So strategic planning in one sense is nothing but to strategize your actions, dovetailing them to what Krishna desires. That is what strategic planning is all about. That is what Vidur does. That is what Bhakti Vinod Thakur does. And that is what actually the Goswamis do. So they engage in the material world in apparently contradictory ways, which seem not very favorable to establishing dharma or devotional service. But Bhakti Vinod Thakur takes this stand knowing very well that this will be most effective to establish Vaishnavism in long term. That is why he engages with the Britishers in a very fruitful way. In fact, the Britishers are so enamored by his character. They, in the biography that Rufilas Prabhu has written, which is based on the autobiography of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, that is Swalikhit Jeevani that he writes. He writes a letter to his son, Lalit Prasad, when he asks the Thakur to describe his Jeevani. So in a 200 pages letter that he writes to Lalit Prasad, in short, he encompasses his whole autobiography up to his point of retirement. That is the year of 1894. So, it's already 9:15. So actually, that is the point, that is the time that Bhakti Vinod Thakur makes a short note of what his life has all been about. But the interesting fact is that Bhakti Vinod Thakur, probably I'll take 10 minutes more, Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually is not only inspiring in terms of being the seventh Goswami, but he is also the one who actually makes a mechanism to transport the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Ragamag of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in an institutionalized way. And he writes this article on Gauranga Samaj. I think it's probably in one of the Gaudiya Patrikas that it appeared, actually describing what this institution is all about. He is definitely not, using the terms institution, but he is actually taking a larger context of a community. So that's why he's using this term as Samaj. And he gives his reference, very interesting. Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually gives reference to how he's actually building this whole concept by the very teachings and life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he quotes the incident of how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself established this Samaj in his conversation with Prakashananda Saraswati. So a very interesting article, and I can just request that you can go through the article. So he gives the references of this conversation with Prakashananda Saraswati, which actually inspires the whole concept of Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually coming up with this concept of starting the institution, which Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada then later pick up. And then he actually delineates even the details of how this community should work. In terms of how the Ishtagoshti should be there, what Ishtagoshti means, what Krishna Katha Goshti means, what is bhajan, what are the external activities related to the propagating of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cult. So it's very interesting actually how he visualizes the whole institution. And it's interesting in the sense because it actually helps a devotee understand what is the purpose of an institution rather than getting into the nitty-gritties of how an institution should actually work. And Prabhupada himself actually was aware of this fact. So he used the institution to propagate the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it's futile to argue actually that, so it's not that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur didn't know that institution is an evil, but then he also used the term necessary evil. So he actually, in one sense, endorsed that you cannot do away with an institution, but at the same time, he was also very aware of the fact that everybody cannot be probably formally accommodated in the institution, and how a devotee should behave in terms of the institution, while engaging with the institution, but not forgetting what the prime objective of an institution is. And that is what actually Bhakti Vinod Thakur also delineates in this essay. But Bhakti Vinod Thakur is basically more known for how he glorified Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his dham and his naam. Bhakti Vinod Thakur glorified his naam by not only himself incessantly chanting the holy names. In fact, from I think 1908 to 1914, he just goes in recluse bhajan in Jagannath Puri, and is just incessantly chanting, taking the external excuse that his body is affected with paralysis. But before that, from 1896 to 1908, even before that actually, very interesting, just like we have this concept of sabbatical, Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually is able to impress the Britishers so much that he is able to take leave of absence from his duty on a number of occasions. Also because of his sickness, but also because he wanted to preach. So the first time he takes a furlough, which is in today's understanding a sabbatical, is for a full 2-year period. So when he's the magistrate, he requests the Britishers to actually give him a 2 years leave of absence because he just wants to preach. It is at this time that he, with one of his friends, interesting because, Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually, even at that point, contemplates to go to Vrindavan with one of his friends. I forget his name now, but Bhringa, I think, that's his name, last name, to go to Vrindavan. And both of them actually discussed. I said, let's go to Vrindavan and do some bhajan. That's it. We are done. So keeping this in mind, they have already discussed this. But in the meantime, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is forced to go on some official duty to Calcutta, which is at that time known as Kalikot. So there he actually stays in the temple of Tarkeshwar Mahadev. And some say it is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, some say it is actually Mahadev himself who actually comes in the dream of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and says, in a dream of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and tells him, why are you planning to go to Vrindavan now? Don't you think that you're forgetting some work that is still to be completed in Navdeep? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he gets this dream, he realizes that probably Mahaprabhu doesn't want him to go to Vrindavan. So he comes back, talks to his friend, and then both of them decide that we will actually preach the holy name of Krishna. So with his friend, he establishes this Namhat preaching, and they're able, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur is actually able to establish about 500 Namhat centers. Not alone. Actually, he takes all of his friends with him. He's not doing it alone. Of course, he is empowered, but he's not doing it alone. He takes the help of his friends and establishes 500 Namhat centers. But before that, or parallel to that, he first actually is able to find the dham of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So at that time, there was a controversy regarding the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And many felt that it was on the west bank of Navdeep. But reading the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and other scriptures, the Bhakti Ratnakar and Narihari Thakur's Navdeep Parikrama Paddhati, he realizes that actually it's on the east bank of the Ganges. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not convinced that Navdeep, that was at that time was the birthplace, accepted as the birthplace, is actually the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So once when he was on the terrace of the Rani Dharmishala there, with his son Kamla Prasad, he's actually able to visualize in the northerly direction on the east bank of Ganges some light emanating. And he asks his son, can you see that light? And he says, yes, I do see it. And he asks one of his clerks, he says, well, I cannot see it. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur just smiles. But the next week, he actually goes to that place, which at that time is known as Balaladigi, after the descendant of Lakshman Sen, that is Balal Sen, still known as Balaladigi, that area. And he goes there and he's able actually to go to the same spot. He's able to identify the spot because the next day, Bhaktivinoda Thakur again climbs the terrace and looks in that direction. He's able to see a very tall tree. So when he goes the next week, he goes to this place and sees that actually there is a small mound which is covered by the tulsi plants. And the residents actually tell him, well, this is the place of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For years we have been worshipping this place as the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because he's a magistrate, immediately somehow gets access to the old maps from the 16th century, which point to this place as Mayapur. In fact, the post office, though it was known as Miyapur at that time, the post office had on itself written as the post office of Mayapur. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is convinced about this point. Well, this has to be the place. But just to, spiritually also have a stamp on it, he requests Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. And you all know the story how he comes down and actually confirms how this is the place of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birth. And of course, when Bhaktivinoda Thakur starts building the temple, they get the Adokshat deity, which archaeologically also gives the confirmation that this is the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually, establishes the dham of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also establishes the dham of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is at this time that he makes those three predictions also. I think it's in 1885 that he writes an article in Sajjan Toshani, where he says that soon a personality will come who will travel unrestricted throughout the world, propagating the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Oh, well will that day come when the fair-skinned brethren will actually come together with the Bengali brethren and chant the names of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Oh, I'm waiting for that day. When that day will come when the fair-skinned ones will dance in the holy names of Shri Krishna in ecstasy. So these 3 predictions he makes, and no soon does actually it comes to bear fruit in the personality of both Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur and Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And it is at this point, when he is in Swanam Sukand Kuj, that he is able to envision the Adbhut Mandir coming soon. In fact, Srila Prabhupada himself says that anyone who helps to build this temple that Bhaktivinoda Thakur envisaged, which will actually flood the world with the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bhaktivinoda Thakur will personally come and take him back to Godhead. So it's this prediction that is made by Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself. And well, it's his appearance day today. And somehow by his mercy, we are engaged in helping that project in some way. So we seek the blessings of all Vaishnavas that we are able to please Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Prabhupada and all the Acharyas to fulfill the prophecy that Bhaktivinoda Thakur made. Of course, I also wanted to say that how Jiva Goswami also fulfills, actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur also fulfills the prophecy that Jiva Goswami makes in his commentaries of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's already 9:30. I think I cannot take more than this. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki, Jai. Okay, Ramandiya.